Jasline's fingers danced over the screen as she filmed her latest soft life reel, voice hushed yet proud. "Just got the keys to my new ride, thank you, mystery man," she cooed, her eyes sparkling in the polished reflection of a gleaming black Rolls-Royce. Outside, the skyline of Atlanta shimmered in the late afternoon sun, luxury skyscrapers giving way to hip cafes and tree-lined streets. Jasline's followers exploded with heart emojis and goals comments. She draped herself over the plush leather seat, laughter tinkling like a bell. Every shot was perfection, her manicured nails tracing the custom stitching on the headrest, the engine purring softly as she revved it for effect. Readers of her feed felt envy prick at their chests. But high above, in a penthouse across town, Sloane Rivera watched the same reel unfold on her glass-walled laptop. The view from Sloane's balcony spilled across the city in a panoramic sweep, nothing less than her dominion. Her own Rolls-Royce sat in the underground garage below, identical in model but with her initials embossed in gold on the headrest. Jasline's triumphant grin sent a cold shiver through Sloane's spine. In that moment, betrayal was coated in gloss and trending with 1,000 shares, but Sloane felt neither shock nor rage. She felt the quiet power of knowledge. By sunrise, she would know every charge, every meeting, every facade Camden had built. And when the time came, she'd reclaim it all. Sunrise found Sloane at her mahogany desk, the city waking beneath her like a living map. She sipped green tea, eyes flicking over spreadsheets and corporate statements on her holographic display. Silence was her strategy, a cloak that let power grow unnoticed. At 29, Sloane had transformed a modest inheritance into a multi-million-dollar empire, real estate in Clarkston and Buckhead, shell companies registered offshore, luxury assets under numbered trusts. No names, just numbers. She was invisible yet omnipotent. Few knew her beyond Camden Wells's wife, and that was fine. It kept her enemies blind to the real player. Camden, polished in custom suits, signed every check she wrote, taking credit in boardrooms that carried her signature in invisible ink. He was her project, her story of success, and she nurtured his ego while she built her kingdom in the shadows. At brunch, unaware of the war unfolding, Jasline admired her reflection in the tinted windows of a midtown cafe. The creamy latte foam clung to her perfect lips as she gossiped about her man spoiling her. But Sloane remembered a time when she trusted Camden. When she believed words like love and partnership meant something. Those days felt naive. Now, behind her serene smile, she plotted thousands of precise moves. Quiet didn't mean weak. It meant unstoppable. By afternoon, the city buzzed with luxury car alarms and champagne-popped gossip. Camden, grinning like a game show host, whisked Jasline into the latest boutique, Marriott and Rose on Peachtree Street, where racks of silk dresses and diamond chokers awaited her approval. Jasline twirled in a mirrored room, captions ready in her head, "Spoil your woman or step aside." Her camera caught every tasteful glance and every swipe of a platinum card except the card belonged to one of Sloane's holding companies. Later, at a rooftop spa overlooking the Beltline, Jasline soaked in a private hot tub, rose petals floating like pink promises. She smiled through cucumber slices on her eyes, texting friends, "He treats me like a queen." Meanwhile, Sloane's inbox pinged with an invoice for a diamond necklace, one she never ordered. It felt like a drip of poison in her blood. Small things, trivial things, but when you built an empire on control, trivialities mattered. How many more gifts had Camden billed to her seas of silent money? The realization ignited a spark of righteous fury, but Sloane closed her eyes and breathed. No outburst, no drama, just planning. That evening, as streetlights blinked on and the city's hum softened, Sloane found a smear of crimson lipstick on Camden's leather briefcase. An echo of Jasline's Barnight lipstick, rich and smudged. Inside, she discovered a receipt from a two-person spa retreat in Decatur. Dates from yesterday. It was the final piece. A breadcrumb in a trail leading straight to betrayal. She pressed her fingertips to her lips, tasting the quiet sweetness of revenge taking shape. She considered confronting Camden there and then, but her mind rewound. She'd learned long ago that confrontation belonged on her terms. Dramatic reveals belonged in tabloids, not in boardrooms or bathrooms. Instead, she tapped a secure line and whispered, "Arrange contact with Harris and Cole Private Investigations." The click at the other end sounded like destiny calling. Under the soft glow of her desk lamp, Sloane drafted a single message to the PI. Surveillance on Camden Wells. Discreet. Comprehensive. I need every detail. She didn't mention Jaslyn by name. She didn't need to. The facts would speak for themselves. Outside, sirens wailed in distant neighborhoods. Life going on, oblivious to the drama brewing above penthouses and parks. Sloane hit send, her heart calm as still water. In the city of secrets, she held the deepest one. That she was not just a wife but the architect of every luxury temptation thrown at Jaslyn. And if one side of the playing field contained her empire, the other side would soon feel the weight of her reckoning. The game had begun. On a pastel Saturday morning, Jaslyn lounged at the Perch Cafe in East Atlanta Village, her designer sunglasses reflecting the neon mural of a phoenix rising behind her. She sipped a pink cloud latte, foam clinging to her glossy lips, and tapped away at her phone. You guys, you have no idea how it feels to finally have someone who showers you with this kind of love, she gushed, setting her black card and car key on the table like a trophy. Her friends, Marisol and Tasha, exchanged hesitant glances. Marisol frowned, tracing circles in her cappuccino foam. But Jazz, no wedding ring, no family photos together, how real is this guy? And whose bank account is that anyway? Tasha leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. Sis, I just want you safe. It's a red flag when someone buys you a penthouse without a name on the lease. Jaslyn laughed, brushing off their concern. You don't get it. He trusts me. Besides, secret relationships are sexy. This is how soft life is supposed to feel. She tapped a photo of her in the Rolls-Royce, captioned blessed beyond belief, and hit post. Comments and hearts flooded in instantly. Yet as Jaslyn reveled in the dopamine rush of validation, a tremor of unease flickered beneath her confidence. Deep down, she wondered why Camden never posted her on his feed, why his stories always featured blurry cityscapes instead of candid moments together. But she silenced that doubt, replacing it with a mantra: women support women. She promised herself she wasn't a side chick, she was the leading lady. Around them, the cafe buzzed with live jazz and the aroma of fresh rosemary biscuits, urban energy swirling in a perfect picture. And in that perfect bubble of filtered light and painterly walls, Jaslyn chose fantasy over facts, love over logic, ignoring the silent engine purring in the basement of Sloane's empire. Later that afternoon, a viral reel ignited the internet. Jaslyn dancing in the back seat of the black Rolls, head thrown back, laughter electric, captioned, "Me and mine." She moved like she owned every inch of that car, hips swaying to an R&B beat as sunlight caught her diamond studs. Across thousands of screens, viewers gasped at the audacity of flaunting that level of wealth. Meanwhile, somewhere in Buckhead, Sloane listened to the ping of a notification on her encrypted phone. She tapped the alert and watched Jaslyn's reel in silence, recognizing the telltale quilted leather and gold-trimmed panels as her own custom design. Each spin of Jaslyn's hair revealed embroidered initials SR hidden under the headrest. The betrayal stung with surgical precision, the audacity to parade stolen luxury like it was a gift. Sloane didn't hurl insults or break her glass desk. She sat straighter, calm as marble. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing, and whispered to herself, "So she thinks she's mine." Then she muted the phone, closed her laptop, and walked across her marble-floored hall to the window. Below, the city ebbed and flowed, unaware its favorite influencer was dancing in someone else's fantasies, financed by the very queen she was dethroning. Sloane inhaled deeply, tasting cold satisfaction. This public display would be the spark that ignited her silent war. The next morning, Sloane slipped into a sleek black blazer and drove herself to the high-rise penthouse Jaslyn believed was hers. The building loomed like a fortress perched above Peachtree Street, draped in mirrored glass. As she rode the elevator, she rehearsed her calm officer voice. Unhurried, polite, unwavering. At the front desk, the concierge offered a courteous nod. "Good morning, Mrs. Wells. The tenant's lease expires next month." Sloane's lips curved into a slight smile. "Thank you. Please inform the tenant that we will not renew the lease. She must vacate by the end of the term." The concierge's brow lifted, confusion flickering. "But she signed for a year." Sloane placed a hand on the mahogany counter, voice steady. Mistaken identity. I am the rightful owner, and I've assumed full control of this unit. Enjoy the rest of your day. Without another word, she pivoted and exited, the glass doors whispering shut behind her. Inside, rose petals still lay scattered across the marble floor, and a silk robe hung on a velvet chair, silent traces of the life Jaslyn thought she owned. Sloane inhaled the faint scent of her signature perfume, then stepped into her car. As the chauffeur drove away, she felt the first real thrill of reclamation. That evening, Sloane stood at the gates of her midtown mansion, palms brushing the cool iron of the rekeyed door. She had already frozen every joint account. Any charge attempted by Camden would be met with a decline message. She'd already revoked his corporate credentials. His sign-off code no longer carried any weight. With a final twist of her new master key, she locked him out. Inside, her personal assistant, Carla, received instructions via secure text. Change all access codes. Update security clearance. Notify me only if there's a breach. The mansion's lights blinked twice, confirming the command. Wordlessly, Sloane activated the silent alarms before walking down her grand staircase to the kitchen, where a single white envelope lay addressed to Camden Wells. She plucked it up, fingers slipping over the embossed paper. Inside was a sheet of portrait paper, a pink slip of sorts, divorce papers framed in quiet authority. No scrawl of emotion, just legal prose severing ties. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. The city hummed beyond the tall windows, but inside was stillness, strategic, potent. The following night, Sloane invited Camden to a private dinner at the Loron, Atlanta's most exclusive rooftop restaurant. She chose a midnight blue gown that matched the skyline, hair sleek behind her ears. Camden arrived, smooth as ever, expecting a reconciliation. In the amber glow of candlelight, he smiled, lifting his glass. To us, he toasted, voice confident. Sloane clasped her hand around her wine, tone warm but distant. To truth, his brow furrowed. Truth? She rested her glass on the table and met his gaze, eyes cool like winter glass. How's your appetite after feeding elsewhere? Camden's smile faltered. He searched her face. Sloane stood, placing a single white rose on his plate, petals scattering. Consider this a lesson in honesty. You'll need it more than you think. Without waiting for his reply, she walked away down the spiral staircase, leaving Camden alone under the stars, the city's lights reflecting off his stunned expression. That night at the Grand Charity Gala, velvet gowns swept across marble floors and crystal chandeliers shimmered like distant galaxies. Jaslyn arrived in the black Rolls-Royce, heels clicking as she stepped onto the red carpet, phone in hand to catch every admiring glance. She beamed at the cameras, blissfully unaware that the valet hovered warily beside the car, phone pressed to his ear. License plate flagged, he murmured. Jaslyn laughed and posed, twisting her hair, until the valet gently but firmly retrieved her keys. Ma'am, I'm sorry. The owner of this vehicle has requested it not be released. Confusion flooded Jaslyn's face. Her perfectly applied lipstick faltered in an uncharacteristic tremble. Behind her, guests paused mid-toast, whispers rippling through the crowd like a gathering storm. Whose car is it really? Suddenly, the doors parted, and Sloane Rivera entered, serene in an emerald gown that contrasted the chaos she'd just engineered. Cameramen abandoned Jaslyn to focus on Sloane's composed entrance. She didn't smile or shout, only lifted a single brow as she passed Jaslyn standing speechless beside her stolen trophy. Music faltered, and the social media livestream exploded with shocked emojis and comments. Plot twist! That's the wife's car. Jaslyn's world flipped. The dress she thought wove her status was unraveled in an instant. Camden, lurking at the fringe of the crowd, stared in horror at the scene, his inflated ego punctured by the truth unfolding in real time. As Sloane glided past, the valet reopened the door and drove her own car away, leaving Jaslyn stranded amid a sea of cameras and stunned onlookers. Heart-pounding, Jaslyn realized her fantasy was a mirage built on someone else's empire, and as the flashbulbs popped like thunder, her soft-life dream collapsed into shards of public humiliation. By dawn, the world had dissected every moment. The video of the valet's refusal went viral, racking up millions of views and sparking debates across platforms. In her secluded home office, Sloane drafted a terse press release on minimalistic stationery. All assets misrepresented by Camden Wells have been legally reclaimed and restored to Mrs. Sloane Rivera. Any further unauthorized use will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. She sent it to her legal team and watched as headlines proliferated. Wife exposes husband's fraud, influencer flaunts stolen luxury, silent power strikes back. Comment sections brimmed with schadenfreude and admiration. She played him, that's how you reclaim your throne, sighed Shikhu. Meanwhile, official notices circulated in corporate channels. Camden's signature revoked, company shares frozen, trust funds redirected. Within hours, creditors called, sponsors withdrew. Camden's polished image unraveled faster than he could react. Jaslyn, bombarded by notifications, felt her follower count plummet as supporters branded her complicit in the deception. The gala footage replayed endlessly, a looping indictment of her blind ambition. But across those same networks, a new narrative emerged, Sloane as the strategic genius who reclaimed her empire with surgical precision. Analysts praised her restraint and spotlighted the calculus behind every move. In Zoom panels and podcast panels, experts dissected her quiet revenge strategy, praising her for dismantling a fraud without a word of public vitriol. Sloane watched it all unfold, a faint smile tracing her lips. Justice wasn't a spectacle of anger. It was the silent reinforcement of power on her terms. A week later, a handwritten letter arrived at Sloane's corporate headquarters, its envelope thick with regret. Jaslyn, who'd retreated into anonymity, had penned an apology in shaky cursive. Dear Mrs. Rivera, I was blinded by a fantasy I thought was real. I never meant to hurt you. I was a mirror reflecting Camden's lies. Please forgive my ignorance and arrogance. I'm sorry for feeding into a deception that wounded you deeply. Sloane studied the words under her desk lamp. The ink smudged where tears must have fallen. She folded the letter, tucking it into a leather portfolio alongside Camden's divorce papers. She felt a flicker of pity, but no warmth. Compassion was a luxury she'd already squandered. Instead, she filed the apology for posterity, a silent testament to how easily people can be seduced by illusion. Later, she drafted a brief note of acknowledgement. Your apology is received. May this experience guide you toward genuine respect for those who build what they cherish. She sent it via certified mail, then deleted the draft to prevent any emotional aftershock. In the quiet aftermath, Sloane realized that true closure wasn't about forgiveness, it was about reclaiming narrative control. The apology letter would sit in her archives as proof that even remorse couldn't reverse the tide of consequences once power was wielded with intent. Months passed and Sloane's reinvention blossomed like a phoenix in spring. She moved into a sleek penthouse overlooking Lake Claire, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing cedar-coated rooftops and rain-soaked streets that glistened under moonlight. A new Rolls-Royce, vivid white this time, custom-fit with her monogram, rested beneath her private garage, a silent emblem of rebirth. In her office, she planted steel desks and glass shelves lined with her own philanthropic projects, scholarships for young entrepreneurs, microloans for Black-owned small businesses, urban art grants. She signed her name on every deed, every check, every press release. Gone was the shadow of the wife of, she was Mrs. Rivera, the architect of change. Her social media channels pivoted from silent observation to strategic inspiration, sharing stories of resilience and self-made triumph. Followers rallied around her ethos, quiet ambition, decisive action, undeniable impact. In board meetings, she spoke first. Her voice carried the weight of accomplishment, not courtesy. Camden's name appeared only in past tense, a cautionary footnote in her autobiography. Jaslyn's scandal became a case study she discussed at conferences. How vulnerability can be weaponized and how strength must be reclaimed. In every arena, corporate, digital, philanthropic, Sloan wove her legacy with intention, proving that reinvention was not merely survival but a form of artistry. On a balmy Saturday evening, Sloan gathered her closest friends, Brielle, Carla, and 2 other confidants, for dinner on her rooftop terrace. The table glowed with lanterns, the skyline's LEDs painting the horizon in electric hues. Over plates of heirloom tomato salad and saffron-infused risotto, laughter spilled like aged wine. Brielle raised her glass. To you, Sloan, silent strength personified. The others echoed the toast, and Sloan felt a warmth bloom in her chest, not of vengeance but of affirmation. She sipped her champagne, eyes twinkling under the city lights, and said softly, quiet didn't mean weakness. It was strategy. I wasn't broken, I was becoming dangerous. She leaned back, letting the moment settle. Then, turning to the camera crew she'd arranged for her next viral installment, she looked straight into the lens and whispered, if you felt that power, hit like, subscribe for more real talk stories, share this with someone who needs to be reminded they're unstoppable. And drop a comment, what lesson stayed with you? As the candles flickered and the city breathed below, Sloan Rivera, queen of her own empire, smiled, knowing the story was just beginning in every heart she'd awakened. 6 months later, Camden drifted through a nearly empty co-working loft in Virginia Highlands, the echo of his footsteps louder than any applause he once commanded. The once polished man who strolled boardrooms on Sloan's capital now hawked marketing consultations at $50 an hour, pitching empty promises to exhausted startups. His tailored suits were replaced by off-the-rack blazers, the gold cufflinks gone, traded for the rent. Each morning, he scrolled through news alerts of Sloan's expanding empire, new real estate deals, fresh funding rounds for women-led tech companies, viral keynote speeches where she revealed the quiet strategy that dethroned him. Every notification pierced him like a reminder of his own deceit. A rival influencer had even offered Camden a guest spot on a podcast titled Lessons from the Fallen, where he was expected to confess failures for clicks. He declined, haunted by the memory of Sloan's calm eyes that first morning she greeted him at the Rekeyed mansion. In the loft's kitchenette, he bent over a mug of instant coffee, contemplating whether remorse could ever rebuild what arrogance destroyed. But remorse tasted bitter. So he forced a smile and replied to an email titled Brand Revival Opportunity, praying someone, anyone, would fund a man who had nothing left but his name. The city moved around him. Trams rattled, bicycle couriers weaved past murals of resilience, and life sputtered onward. Yet for Camden, time had slowed. He realized too late that the kingdom he stole from never belonged to him, and in every empty chair and silent hall, he heard the faint clap of justice's echo. Across town, Jaslyn sat at a wooden table in a small nonprofit's makeshift office, sunlight slanting over peeling paint and half-stacked file boxes. The black card and designer wardrobe were distant memories, traded for thrift store finds and late-night coffee runs as a volunteer social media coach. Her followers had shrunk from millions to a few dozen devoted supporters who valued honesty over gloss. At first, she disappeared, overwhelmed by shame. Then, one morning, she awoke to the thought that she could transform her humiliation into purpose. If I was the puppet, I can help others cut their strings, she whispered, drafting posts about financial literacy for young women, about spotting red flags in too-good-to-be-true relationships. Her voice shook with vulnerability as she filmed her first raw reel. No filters, no background music, just her telling the story of how she almost lost herself chasing a borrowed dream. Comments poured in. Thank you for the truth. I needed to hear this. You're stronger than you think. Each message stitched a new thread of confidence into her heart. At night, she closed her laptop and stared at the ceiling of her modest apartment in East Atlanta, thinking of Sloan and wondering if the silent mogul even knew of her efforts. But in her chest, the coil of regret had loosened, replaced by purpose. Jaslyn realized that redemption wasn't a press release. It was daily action, a quiet rebuild of identity stronger than any stolen car. In a glass tower overlooking the Beltline, Sloan prepared for her first quiet power conference, a gathering of women who had overcome betrayal, invisibility, or self-doubt to claim leadership in business and community. She curated speakers who turned scandal into scholarship, who transformed heartbreak into philanthropy. The conference floor buzzed with anticipation. Models of microfinance for urban artisans, panels on boardroom dynamics, immersive workshops on emotional resilience. When Sloane took the stage, clad in a charcoal pantsuit and emerald earrings, the room fell silent. She told them the story of her Rolls-Royce, of the betrayal that stinged when she saw her own initials wrested by illusion. But she didn't linger on fury. She spoke of strategy, of collecting data before making moves, of the power in calm observation. Her voice was warm yet steel-edged. "Reclaiming your narrative isn't about spectacle," she said. "It's about precision. It's about building in the shadows until your light can't be ignored." Laptops glowed as attendees furiously took notes, while journalists in the back snapped photos for a trending story. #silent signature. Later, as she mingled, a young entrepreneur tested her. "How do you forgive someone who weaponized your generosity?" Sloane paused, then answered with characteristic poise, "I don't forgive to free them. I strategize to free myself." The questioner nodded, eyes bright. Around her, Sloane saw not paparazzi or rivals, but a network of allies forged by shared scars and mutual ambition. The conference was more than an event. It was a turning point, proof that the empire built in silence could echo louder than any scream. Not long after the conference, a shadow crept across Sloane's pristine world. An anonymous hacking group boasted online that they had infiltrated her financial server and held client data hostage. A message glowed on every newsroom ticker. Will Mrs. Rivera's silence protect her empire from cyber chaos? Spreadsheet alarms blared in her night office as her cybersecurity team confirmed a breach attempt. But Sloane felt no panic. She recognized the pattern. Another test of her fortress, another challenge to her calm. She convened a midnight war room, holographic screens floating with code and bullet point strategies. "Lock down all endpoints," she directed. "Deploy the decoy ledger, make them chase false trails. Meanwhile, trace the breach back to its source and neutralize it." Her team moved like a well-oiled machine, rerouting traffic, triggering honeypots, and feeding the hackers counterfeit data. Within 24 hours, they identified the culprit, a disgruntled former associate of Camden's, seeking to smear her reputation for personal vengeance. Sloane arranged a private legal notice, no press release this time, neutralizing the threat with quiet authority. The hackers vanished, their names scrubbed from the dark web. Morning headlines barely mentioned the attempted breach. She had turned a potential disaster into a non-story. Over coffee in her sunlit kitchen, she reflected on the paradox. True strength wasn't in shouting back. It was in controlling the narrative so completely that the noise never mattered. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Sloane drove to a renovated community center in West End, where children from her scholarship programs learned coding, finance, and public speaking. She parked the white Rolls-Royce herself, no chauffeur today, and walked past colorful murals depicting local legends of resilience. Inside, she greeted students with firm, encouraging hugs, listening to their dreams of apps and startups. At the back of the room, Jaslyn stood by a projector, leading a workshop on authentic content creation, her once smudged lipstick replaced by a steady, confident smile. Their eyes met briefly across the room. No words passed, only a nod of mutual recognition. Two women who had risen from their own ashes. Later, Sloane joined Jaslyn and a small group of interns in the courtyard, sunlight filtering through oak trees. An intern asked, "What's the most important lesson from your stories?" Jaslyn answered first, "Never let someone else's illusion define your worth." Then Sloane added, "And never mistake silence for weakness. It's the pause before movement." As they spoke, families wandered past, children chased autumn leaves, and the hum of urban life thrummed around them. In that shared moment, Sloane saw the true measure of power, not in assets reclaimed or empires built, but in lives uplifted and narratives rewritten. The city pulsed with possibility, and she knew that her legacy would be measured not by headlines, but by every story she inspired. Camden woke before dawn, the Virginia Highlands skyline gray and empty through his loft's east-facing windows. His phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, group therapy, accountability session. He hadn't seen it coming, this invitation from a support network for executives fallen from grace, but he needed something real, not another pitch deck or empty promise. By sunrise, he was seated on a folding chair in a modest church basement, fluorescent lights humming overhead, walls lined with fading posters reading, "Healing starts here." He offered a weak smile to the facilitator, a soft-spoken woman named Denise who'd introduced herself as someone who believes in rebuilding from the ashes. When it was his turn, he cleared his throat and began. "I stole someone's life, and by the time I realized it, I couldn't undo the damage." His voice cracked, the room silent except for the distant hum of traffic. Denise nodded, guiding him through prompts. "What did you learn? Where will you go from here?" Tears gathered as he confessed that genuine success meant more than borrowed assets or hollow applause. A man in the circle, a former attorney, offered empathy. "Sometimes, owning your mistakes is the first step toward real ownership." Camden left that morning feeling raw, stripped of illusions but oddly lighter. The city outside was alive with possibilities. Streetcars rattling, vendors arranging pastries, neighbors jogging past mural-painted walls. He realized his comeback wouldn't be about recapturing a throne. It would be about forging a new identity grounded in truth. Meanwhile, across town in East Atlanta, Jaslyn stood before a small crowd of young women clutching notebooks and recording on their phones. The nonprofit office hummed with fluorescent lights and the scent of secondhand library books. She'd converted her experience into a red flags workshop, teaching others how to spot emotional manipulation and financial deception. Her hands trembled as she launched into her first presentation. "I was blinded by a fantasy, parading luxury that wasn't mine. But that nightmare taught me a lesson I never want you to learn the hard way." She guided attendees through role-playing exercises, shared budgeting templates, and encouraged questions until the clock struck 8 and streetlights flickered on outside. One student asked through tears, "How do I trust again?" Jaslyn paused, recalling her own heartbreak, then answered, "By anchoring trust in yourself, not in gifts or empty words." After the session, her inbox flooded with DMs. "Thank you for saving me. I canceled my subscription to a toxic sugar daddy app." Each message was a reminder that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about channeling pain into purpose. When she finally closed her laptop, the city's neon signs blinked across her window pane, and Jaslyn felt the stirrings of a new confidence. Back in Buckhead, Sloane dissected the day's headlines over jasmine tea in her minimalist kitchen. An investigative blogger had questioned her philanthropic reach, suggesting her grants might mask ulterior motives. The insinuation stung. She had built her scholarship fund to honor her own mother's legacy, not to craft headlines. But she recognized the tactic: plant doubt to destabilize quiet power. She opened a new document titled Transparency Initiative, outlining a plan to publish anonymized impact reports from every beneficiary, complete with verifiable metrics and personal testimonials. By noon, her team had drafted the first template, incorporating blockchain timestamps for each grant award. Sloane reviewed it on her holo display, satisfied. She called her director of communications and said, "We'll release the report next Monday." No fanfare, just facts. Let them see what real strategy and real empathy look like. Outside, a light spring rain washed the city's streets, and she stepped onto her balcony, eyes tracing the curve of the beltline as joggers passed below. In the quiet, she found strength, proof that anticipation of sabotage was just another prelude to her next calculated victory. In a downtown studio loft repurposed as a training center, Camden volunteered as a guest speaker for young entrepreneurs barred from traditional funding after setbacks. The space smelled of fresh paint and ambition. Laptops clicked, whiteboards filled with growth hacks. He cleared his throat in front of a dozen eager faces and said, "Failure is a badge if you let it teach you. I lost everything, my marriage, my reputation, my car, and I'm here because I want to help you build something real." He shared his story without gloss, the betrayal of Sloane's empire, the viral expose, the cold silence of abandonment. His honesty landed with unexpected resonance. Attendees scribbled notes, nodding at each confession of pride and remorse. Afterward, a young woman approached, eyes bright. "Your transparency gave me courage to pitch my app without hiding its flaws." Camden realized that redemption wasn't about reacquiring wealth. It was about repurposing his narrative to empower others. As he packed up to leave, the city's skyline burned gold in the sunset, and he felt a quiet hope flicker in his chest. That evening, Jaslyn and Sloane met unexpectedly at a charity art auction hosted in an old cotton warehouse near the Chattahoochee River. The space was transformed. Industrial beams draped in fairy lights, canvases depicting urban resilience hanging on exposed brick walls, local jazz musicians drifting through half-empty corners. Jaslyn glanced across the room to find Sloane examining a sculpture built from repurposed auto parts. Ironic, given their shared history with a certain luxury car. Their eyes met in the dim glow. Jaslyn swallowed, heart-pounding. Sloane offered a slight nod, a silent invitation. They approached each other as guests continued to bid on paintings, oblivious to the tension between them. Jaslyn spoke first, voice soft. "I wanted to thank you. Not just for the lessons, but for inspiring me to build something that matters." Sloane's lips curved in a rare, genuine smile. "Thank you for reminding me that even strategy needs soul." They stood amid the hum of commerce and creativity, two women transformed by betrayal, each wielding her own brand of power. In that shared moment, the city's pulse seemed to hold its breath, recognizing that healing and reinvention were the truest forms of quiet revenge. Weeks after the art auction, Sloane and Jaslyn's unexpected alliance blossomed into a community initiative they quietly dubbed Keys to Clarity. They transformed a disused garage on Auburn Avenue into a pop-up hub where refurbished cars, once symbols of misplaced luxury, became tools for empowerment. Jaslyn curated every social media post, sharing raw interviews with women who, like her, had chased borrowed dreams and discovered resilience instead. Meanwhile, Sloane quietly underwrote the restoration costs, negotiated vendor contracts, and mapped out a 12-month strategic plan to ensure sustainability. On opening day, the scent of fresh paint and motor oil mingled with the aroma of coffee from a local roaster Sloane had contracted through her small business fund. Neighbors lined up for free driving lessons, budgeting workshops, and emotional wellness circles hosted in an adjacent modular classroom. Volunteers in matching teal shirts, Jaslyn's design guided attendees through skill-building modules, credit repair, resume drafting, even basic auto maintenance. Cameras rolled as Jaslyn spoke candidly. "When I thought I owned a Rolls, I owned nothing but an illusion. Today, I own my story, and so can you." Her voice cracked with emotion, and the crowd leaned in, phones lowered in respect. Later, Sloane addressed the same group with surgical calm. "Strategy isn't just for boardrooms. It's for every space where you reclaim power." She handed each graduate a symbolic key, engraved with the program's logo and a personal affirmation. The atmosphere thrummed with gratitude and possibility as tribal beats from a local DJ pulsed through speakers. By sunset, local news crews captured testimonials that went viral. Hashtag Keys to Clarity trended across platforms. Not for scandal, but for solidarity. As the event wound down, Jaslyn and Sloane stood side by side, watching women promise each other rides to job interviews and savings group meetups. In that moment, the stolen keys and broken dreams had been recast into catalysts for genuine change, proving that redemption and reinvention could transform even the most fractured narratives into stories of collective triumph. In the months that followed, Camden's path of redemption led him to an unlikely frontier, community center cybersecurity training. Haunted by his own involvement in financial deception and the attempted hack against Sloane's empire, he partnered with nonprofit tech collectives to teach digital literacy in underprivileged neighborhoods. The irony wasn't lost on him that, after losing the code to Sloane's boardroom, he was now scripting Python tutorials in a cramped basement filled with second-hand desktops. Each evening, he guided teenagers through safe password practices, phishing simulations, and the ethics of digital footprints. He shared his story not to garner pity, but to illustrate how trust and transparency underpin every secure network. If you design systems to be invisible, he told his students, you must also be ready to face the light when they fail. Word of his workshop spread. Local high schools invited him to speak at assemblies. Sponsors who once shunned his name now funded his initiatives, seeing value in his authenticity. In a pivotal moment, he co-hosted a hackathon where teams built apps that connected community members with mental health resources. As his protégés presented polished prototypes, Camden felt a sense of purpose he'd never known when flaunting borrowed wealth. His laughter in those halls was unforced, his confidence earned, and his past transgressions had become the scaffolding for genuine contribution. He logged off each night with a lightness in his chest, the memory of Sloane's silent judgment replaced by the dings of notification from students thanking him. The city around him still pulsed with trends and gossip, but Camden had discovered that the most lasting legacy was built not on borrowed dreams, but on the code you leave behind in the minds of others. Back at her Skyline penthouse, Sloane surveyed the quarterly report for Keys to Clarity, metrics displayed on a glass touch wall in neon blue graphs. Graduates' average credit scores had risen by 45 points, employment rates among participants jumped to 87%, and social media sentiment had swelled into a global conversation about strategic empathy. She noted these figures without fanfare, tapping a stylus to schedule the next phase, a mobile iteration of the program for suburbs where transit was scarce. As she drafted the rollout plan, her mind drifted to the woman who'd once revved her own car in reckless pride. Jaslyne's transformation from sidechick real star to program co-founder had been one of the richest ironies of Sloane's career. But beyond irony lay a deeper truth, that power reclaims itself most effectively when it uplifts others. In the glow of her office, she drafted a keynote speech for the upcoming Global Women's Forum, weaving her personal saga into lessons on narrative control and ethical leadership. She wrote, "Quiet strategy is a form of radical compassion. It recognizes power not as a weapon but as a tool for collective elevation." Satisfied, she closed the document and stood, stretching against the curve of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the city lights blinked on in sequence, like data points in an algorithm she'd mastered. The quiet hum of the elevator signaled Carla's entrance with the afternoon tea tray. Sloane smiled, accepting a porcelain cup, reflecting on how far she'd come from silent observer to orchestrator of change. The empire she reclaimed was no longer just assets and accounts but lives reshaped by opportunity. And as the rain pattered against the glass, she felt an unspoken pact with the future to wield her power not for vengeance but for enduring impact. Social media had its say. Influencer panels dissected the trilogy of Sloane, Jaslyne, and Camden like primetime drama, creating memes and think pieces that trended under hashtags like #SilentStrategy, #SideChickNoMore, and #HackerTurnedHero. Graphic artists remixed the iconic gala freeze frame of Sloane's eyebrow with Jaslyne's stunned expression, turning it into a motivational poster when you realize your power. Podcast hosts invited all three, sometimes separately, sometimes in unlikely roundtables, to debate themes of betrayal, redemption, and strategic empathy. Viewers commented in the millions. "I cried, I learned, this is the blueprint." Universities requested case studies, business schools analyzed Sloane's calm reset, while sociology courses examined Jaslyne's identity reclamation. Camden's workshops were featured in tech philanthropy reports, praising his pivot from deceit to digital educator. Even Sloane's initial ire had become a legend, the silent queen who moved in shadows only to re-emerge in the light. Through it all, the story remained human. A narrative arc that began with gloss and deception, plunged into betrayal, and ascended into collective empowerment. Algorithms rewarded authentic engagement, boosting every program link, every testimonial video. Brands reached out to sponsor Keys to Clarity expansions, recognizing that true virality was born from shared human truth. not contrived scandal. In endless retellings, the moral crystallized. Power reclaimed with empathy reverberates far beyond any stolen luxury. And as the world clicked, scrolled, and shared, the living saga of Sloane, Jaslyn, and Camden continued to inspire millions. Proof that the quietest moves often make the loudest impact. As the sun set on this chapter of their intertwined lives, the camera pans out from a bustling community center, where restored cars gleam under afternoon light, to a city skyline that glows with promise. You've witnessed how betrayal can spark strategy, how redemption blooms from humility, and how true power speaks in actions louder than any word. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt the sting of injustice, the chill of revenge, or the warmth of reinvention, then please do 3 simple things. Like this video to show you stand for strategic empathy. Subscribe to our channel for more hard-hitting, emotionally real tales. Share with friends who need a reminder that silence can be your greatest weapon. And comment below with your biggest takeaway or a lesson you'll carry forward. Your engagement fuels our storytelling, and together, we'll keep turning viral moments into moments of real transformation. If you watched this far, please kindly subscribe to the channel, like the video and comment your thoughts below. Your support would really help us grow. Thank you and see you in the next one if you subscribed.